What if one of the largest contributors to Britain's victory in World War II was never Germany's defeat, but India's bankruptcy? What if the British Empire didn't pay for the war the way history textbooks suggest, but quietly shifted the cost onto its colony, draining India's wealth without firing a single shot? No invasion, no treaty signed under duress, no obvious theft, just accounting entries, frozen balances, and a currency system most people have never heard of. This is the story of how Britain fought World War II without money, how India unknowingly became the empire's banker, and how a financial mechanism called the sterling system turned wartime necessity into one of the largest wealth transfers in modern history. And the most disturbing part, the system didn't collapse with the war. It shaped India's poverty, Britain's post-war survival, and the global financial order we still live under today. By the late 1930s, the British Empire was overstretched. It ruled nearly a quarter of the world's population, controlled key trade routes, and depended on colonies not just for resources, but for financial stability. India was the crown jewel, not only because of its size, but because of what it provided: raw materials, soldiers, taxes, and most importantly, foreign exchange earnings. India exported massive quantities of goods to the world: cotton, jute, tea, rice, iron ore. Those exports earned hard currency, especially pound sterling. But here's the first twist. India did not control the pounds it earned. Under British rule, India's international payments were settled in sterling, held in London, under British authority. These were called sterling balances. At first glance, they looked like savings. In reality, they were IOUs issued by Britain to India, spendable only when Britain allowed it. This system would soon become the financial backbone of Britain's war effort. To understand the scandal, you need to understand the mechanism. Before World War II, Britain ran a global currency network centered on the pound sterling, the world's reserve currency at the time. Colonies like India sold goods abroad, earned sterling, deposited those earnings in London, used sterling to buy British goods or pay for imports. But the key detail: Britain controlled convertibility. India could not freely convert sterling into gold or dollars. It could not decide how or when to spend its balances. Britain acted as the banker and the gatekeeper. As long as trade flowed normally, the system seemed stable. Then came 1939. When World War II began, Britain faced a brutal reality. It was running out of money. Its gold reserves were draining. Dollar reserves were collapsing. Imports of food, fuel, and weapons were skyrocketing. By 1941, Britain was nearly bankrupt. So how did it keep fighting? The answer lies in India. Instead of paying India for military supplies, food, raw materials, soldier wages, Britain simply credited India's account with sterling. No cash, no gold, no dollars, just promises. India supplied over 2.5 million soldiers, the largest volunteer army in history. Massive quantities of food and equipment, industrial output redirected entirely to the war effort, and in return, India's sterling balances exploded. From about £160 million in 1939 to over £1.3 billion by 1945. That was an astronomical sum at the time, equivalent to hundreds of billions today. But here's the delayed answer to the mystery. India could not use that money. On paper, India was richer than ever. In reality, it was being strangled. Britain imposed strict controls. Sterling balances could not be converted. Imports were restricted. Spending required British approval. Why? Because if India spent freely, Britain would collapse. Releasing those funds would trigger inflation in Britain, drain scarce dollars, undermine post-war recovery, so Britain froze India's money. And while balances sat unused in London, something else happened. India suffered shortages. Food diverted to the war effort. Inflation surged. Prices rose while wages stagnated. This directly contributed to one of the darkest chapters in colonial history. In 1943, Bengal starved. Over 3 million people died. This was not caused by drought. It was caused by wartime requisitioning, transport monopolized for military use, inflation driven by deficit financing, food exports prioritized for imperial needs. India had food. India had money on paper. but Britain controlled both. Even as people died, sterling balances grew. The system had reached its moral breaking point, but the financial reckoning was still ahead. After the war, India demanded its money. Independence came in 1947, but freedom came with conditions. Britain refused to pay immediately. Instead, sterling balances were released slowly, payments were spread over years, spending remained restricted. Why? Because Britain was now dependent on the same money it owed. It used Indian balances to stabilize the pound, pay for imports, rebuild its economy. In effect, India financed Britain's post-war recovery, and when India finally accessed the funds, much of their value had been eaten away by inflation, currency devaluation, forced spending on British goods. What looked like repayment was actually a managed loss. Britain framed the issue as technical. Negotiations focused on exchange rates, release schedules, import priorities, but the structural damage was done. India inherited low reserves, industrial underdevelopment, chronic balance of payments problems. The sterling system collapsed globally, but not before transferring immense costs from empire to colony. Britain avoided default. India absorbed the shock. This isn't ancient history. The mechanism has changed, but the pattern hasn't. Today, reserve currencies still dominate global trade. Countries accumulate foreign exchange. They can't freely use sanctions, freeze assets overnight. Debt replaces direct extraction. The sterling system was a prototype. Replace sterling with dollars. Replace empire with institutions. Replace colonies with developing economies. The logic is the same. Those who issue money write the rules, and those who hold reserves bear the risk. Takeaway 1. War is often financed not by victory but by invisible transfers. Takeaway 2. Control over currency matters more than ownership of wealth. Takeaway 3. Economic systems can extract more efficiently than armies. India paid for a war it didn't start, suffered famine during a global fight for freedom, and inherited poverty wrapped in legal paperwork. The question isn't whether this could happen again, it's whether we recognize it when it does. If this story changed how you see empire, money, or war, like the video. Subscribe for more hidden history, and comment below. Was the sterling system a wartime necessity, or one of the greatest financial injustices in modern history? Because history doesn't repeat itself loudly, it repeats quietly in ledgers, balances, and promises.